Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. Some more injuries, which is, a recurring theme of this season. And then risers, fallers, Freeman's favorite, and sicko starts at each and every position. Talk about a great day to be great. So, of course, joining me as I do every single Thursday, we got Dwain, The Rock, McFarland, and Matt F. the Oracle. That's right, that little kid from the league is all grown up. So we'll start off with you, Dwain. Happy Thursday.
What's up? Happy Thursday, Ian. The only positive about some of these injuries is I look at my teams that already have a ton of injuries. I'm like, hey, I don't think I can catch up with these other teams if they're healthy. But if they're all hurt like mine, so you're saying I got a chance, Ian. I got a chance. We have a chance. We have several teams together that are like 2 and 3. You look at it, I'm like, man, look at all these hurt players on the bench. So maybe, just maybe, we can catch up. Sorry, guys. Sorry if you have Nico Collins. We also have him, so we lost in on him on some teams. So that's just me trying to find a silver lining. I know it was a pretty terrible job at it, though.
It's like that meme of the guy pointing at himself in the mirror, like, you're not a bad fantasy manager. Your entire team just is hurt. Freeman, are all of your teams hurt, I'm assuming?
No, I mean, amazingly, because I draft bad players, and those tend to be the guys who don't get hurt because they don't see playing time. Right. It's easy to stay healthy when you're not on the field. So my team's totally bad, but fully healthy.
What a concept by Freeman, always one step ahead of the rest of us. So again, guys, big day ahead. And with that, let's get to the sad news that Dwain already briefly mentioned. Texans wide receiver 1 and the receiving yards leader of the NFL, Nico Collins, has been placed on IR with that hamstring injury. So started off as day-to-day yesterday morning, and then he went to week, and then less than 24 hours later, he was on IR. So Dwain, incredibly unfortunate. We kind of broke down what this room was going to look like on yesterday's show as it is, but yeah, at least 4 weeks without Nico. That sucks.
Yeah, man. So for the next 4 weeks, obviously, we've got Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz are all going to have bigger opportunities. I'll just talk about the 2 wide receivers real quick. They're 2 of the biggest upgrades this week in the Rankings Risers article over at FantasyLife.com. Folks can go check out the complete thing there. But we look at Stephon Diggs. He's got a 22% target share this year, Ian. He's got a 7.1 utilization score, which historically says he's already a wide receiver 2, most likely. So with Nico Collins out, he's going to be a borderline wide receiver 1. So you're going to have Stephon Diggs in all fantasy lineups, all shapes, all sizes. Tank Dell's the real question, right? Because Tank Dell, we saw it last year in these games where he played at least 50% of the passing snaps. We're talking about a guy that averaged almost 18 fantasy points per game, Ian. We haven't seen that yet this year, but he is coming off of a late season fibula fracture at the end of last year. The guy got shot in the leg this offseason in May, so it could be a health thing. But I'm just telling you, at any moment, this switch could flip, and if it does, you're going to want Tank Dell in your lineups. I've already been looking at the lineups where I've got Dell available, and I'll be honest, like I can't leave him out. Like I've been putting him into all the lineups, even though we know that he's been struggling to start the season. So I think he's a low-end wide receiver 2, but man, he gives you wide receiver 1 upside. When I say wide receiver 1, the number 1 wide receiver on the slate on any given week, because the guy can just go off for 35 points at the drop of a hat with CJ Stroud at the helm. He and Stroud, man, they've got great chemistry. They just have to find it again this season.
Especially of the downfield variety. Diggs, just a 6.6 yard average target depth this year. Dell is up there past 11 yards, much closer to Nico. Freeman, the one guy that Dwain did not mention is one Xavier Hutchinson, Iowa State's finest. Any sort of love for the wide receiver 3 in Houston now?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, it's speculative. I actually did pick him up in some dynasty leagues, and I think it's a little bit under the radar. Some people might think Robert Woods or John Mechie, but no, it's Xavier Hutchinson who actually ended up seeing the workload as the number 3 wide receiver. The thing is, if Tank Dell wasn't doing much with Nico Collins on the field, I don't know if Hutchinson is going to be doing much with Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs and maybe Dalton Schultz getting the majority of the aerial action. So I think he's someone in deeper leagues who should be rostered, but you're not looking to start him right away unless you're a true sicko. I think you have him on the bench, see if he actually does anything, and then maybe you start him if you get desperate enough.
Guys, in my 32-team fantasy league, I've had number 1 waiver priority all year. Finally used it. Xavier Hutchinson. Let's go, man. Let's go. All right. Another sad wide receiver injury to get through. Colts wide receiver 1, Michael Pittman, back issue. Not an IR yet, but it is sounding like a possibility. At a minimum, he is expected to miss several weeks. So, Dwayne, we've talked about the differences of having Joe Flacco versus Anthony Richardson under center and everything that does. But now when you pull Michael Pittman out, maybe, just maybe, Josh Downs becoming more of a weekly starter regardless of who is under center.
Yeah, really what we need from Downs to unlock weekly upside is he needs to be getting targeted further down the field. He's already got a 30% target share in his first 3 games back, Ian, but the problem has been that average depth of target is very shallow. So he's just getting used around the line of scrimmage. And that makes him more of a Wan'Dale Robinson type. Not that that's bad, Ian. I think you'll let me know very quickly. Like, where's Wan'Dale Robinson ranked in fantasy right now? Way higher than most people think. So that can still be really valuable in a PPR format. But the thing with whenever we talk about Josh Downs is we know that he actually has the skill set to work deep. This was a guy that was great from the slot, working vertical pass routes in college at North Carolina. So we know that capability is there. It's just, will they use him that way? So Pittman was more of an underneath guy. So I tend to think that it's probably not going to change Josh Downs' role too much. I will say this. If Joe Flacco's on the field, Josh Downs is a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. If Anthony Richardson is on the field, Josh Downs is a wide receiver 3. You're just hoping things don't go wrong with. So it really does come down to who's starting this weekend. I think the huge winner here, and he's on most waiver wires, Ian, is Adonai Mitchell. We already know Pierce is the deep threat. He's going to get, 3 targets a week, but sometimes you get 2 for 100 yards and a touchdown and it works out for you. But Adonai Mitchell is the other guy that, he's their second round pick this year, a lot of raw ability. I think he's the one that's going to replace Michael Pittman. We'll see how he fares with it, but he shouldn't be on waiver wires in large leagues. In fact, in all the leagues that you and I managed last night, when that news came in, my wife just heard me go, she goes, what? And I go, it's actually good news. I go, but I have to go back in here and adjust. Ian and I have like 20 teams together, guys. So I had to go through all of them and move Adonai Mitchell up to the top of our bid list and all of those. So yeah, while it was a pain, I'm excited. I'm ready to go unwrap those Christmas gifts this morning and see if we got Adonai Mitchell. Ian, he has major talent. So even if it's just for a few games that you get to use him, like, he's the guy that has the most upside in this group right now until Pittman returns, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for taking care of that, Dwayne. Again, hopefully our dead in the water teams can now start rising up with Adonai Mitchell. I will say, as bad as Mitchell's box score stats have been this year, I get it. He has been a disappointment there. Really, guys, I would argue the prime example of someone not benefiting from quarterback play, which a bit ironic considering what he dealt with at Texas last year. A lot of people, bringing up that storyline constantly as well. But seriously, from week 1 on, I'd argue at least 3, if not 4 touchdowns missed on deep balls and numerous other big plays as well. So Freeman, it really is wild, man. We have a 39-year-old backup who has thrown for 300-plus yards in 6 consecutive games, where if we get him under center, all of a sudden it seemingly unlocks the entire offense. But instead, we might have Anthony Richardson, who is good for his own fantasy managers. Don't get me wrong, most of the time at least. But yeah, Flacco certainly would be a lot cooler for these wide receivers. So anyone you want to put a chip on specifically between Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell?
Pierce is interesting in that, he doesn't get the targets, but maybe he's just running hot, but he's pacing for over 1,000 yards. That can't sustain. But Flacco, you say the same thing with him. He can't sustain his production either, and yet it looks somewhat sustainable because he's just been doing it every game going back to last season. And with Flacco out there and his willingness to throw it deep, that creates a situation where Pierce is a little more interesting. Adonai Mitchell, I would say, unquestionably has more talent. My question would be, how is it that he is functioning within this offense? Does he play more of the Michael Pittman role? Do they have him kind of take over a little more of the deep threat role? I know that he has the ability to move into the slot. When Josh Downs was out, that's where he played. Did they have him rotate a little bit into the slot and sometimes split Downs out? I will just be curious to see how it is that they use Adonai Mitchell. And if they use him in the kind of fully functional, well-rounded way, then all of a sudden, he might end up being the number 1 receiver in that offense. And even when Pittman comes back, Mitchell could have a very strong role and Pierce ends up getting squeezed out. So Mitchell feels like the higher upside play, but Pierce feels like he has a very solid locked in role that with Flacco at quarterback actually might be sustainable, especially if you're just an underdog in your matchup looking for a flyer. He is maybe the guy who could get you there.
Ian, Adonai Mitchell only rostered 9% of the time in Yahoo, just for people listening. He's Available even in your league, pal.
Even in your league, pal. Last note, Alec Pierce, guys, 21.6 yards per target. Not even per reception, 21 yards per target this season. That is easily tops in the NFL. Nobody else is even above 15 right now. So it goes back to, again, that meme of the creepy guy, you know, talking to the lady who gets HR called on him. That's Alec Pierce, you know, Rashid Shaheed's the cool guy. I think we all get that. But yeah, certainly, you know, a great start to the year for Alec Pierce. We'll see if he can keep it up. So those were the two big news items, everyone, but have a handful of other items I want to quickly run through before we get to our rankings. So starting off at quarterback, the Saints did confirm Spencer Rattler will be starting against the Buccaneers. Should be a fun time for better or worse with his, you know, kind of DGAF YOLO ball style. Also, Aiden O'Connell is now the starting QB for the Raiders against the Steelers in the quarterback competition that nobody really cares about, but we are forced to deal with anyway. Will Levis and Russell Wilson practicing in full. That's good. And speaking of Anthony Richardson, was limited with the oblique injury. Did say he is feeling quote unquote way better than last week though. At running back, Texans RB Dameon Pierce is expected to play this week after suffering that hamstring injury all the way back in week 1, I believe. So the Dario Gumbawale era seems to be over. Limited practices, Devin Singletary, Jalen Warren, Nick Chubb, and Audric Estime, who had his 21-day practice window opened up. A lot of DMPs just Wednesday, so don't freak out. Don't lose your composure, everybody. But that said, Alvin Kamara, James Cook, Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, Zach Moss, Zamir White, as well as Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon, all banged up for the time being. Guys to keep an eye on and guys that Dwain and myself will undoubtedly be talking about on our Friday injury edition. At wide receiver, good news for Eagles wide receivers A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, both practicing in full and expecting to suit up this week. Similar sentiment for Romeo Doubs, who returned to practice, and Xavier Legette, also practicing in full. Also got Christian Watson back at practice in a limited fashion, but again, goes to show you guys not expecting to miss too much time. However, we do have another group of DMPs. Malik Neighbors with that concussion. Why can't we have nice things? Was at least working off on the side, so hopefully he'll be ready for Sunday night, but yeah, not ideal for now. Also, Raiders wide receivers Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers not practicing. Adams is not expecting to play this week per Jeremy Fowler. Rashid Shaheed, Khalil Shakur, Curtis Samuel, and Rashad Bateman rounding out the DMPs at wide receiver. And finally, everyone, George Kittle, good to go for Thursday Night Football. Love to hear that. Jaguars tight end Evan Ingram still practicing in a limited fashion, and more DMPs at tight end. David Njoku, which was expected given that he aggravated that ankle and knee injury. Taysom Hill dealing with fractured ribs, and Mike Gesicki, guys, dealing with a hamstring issue. If you are in some deep leagues, and I do mean deep, might need to take a long look at Eric All, who will get a nice bump if we do see Gesicki out of the picture. So that's going to wrap up the news, everybody. But before we get to rankings, a quick word to our friends over at New Era. Let me get my Seahawks hat on. Got to shout out the Geno Smith company getting their Thursday Night Football on. Can't wait, everybody. What's up, fantasy football fanatics? There's a new era at FantasyLife. Gear up for kickoff with the official cap of NFL Sidelines from New Era Cap. This weekend's matchups are packed with fantasy implications, and no matter which teams or stars you're backing, New Era has the gear you'll need to keep you in the game. From classic fitted caps to iconic snapbacks, New Era's premium designs and comfort let you showcase your team pride and style. Elevate your game day look now with the official cap of NFL Sidelines from New Era Cap. That was a hot graphic. Guys, it's Risers and Fallers rankings time, presented by our friends over at DraftKings, going through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and yes, even tight end. Riser, Faller, Freeman's favorite, and of course, a sicko start from Dwain as well. So fellas, let's kick it off with some quarterbacks, and the one riser happens to be the man that you both, and yes, me as well, are big fans of. Let's talk about Dak Prescott going up against the Lions, Dwain, a secondary that, let's face it, we shouldn't be very fearful of.
Hey, look, Prescott got a downgrade last week. So, I mean, we're fair and biased in our approach here. We're just following the data. And whenever you look at Prescott and the matchup that we have this weekend, Ian, it just screams funnel defense. When you look at the Detroit Lions, they're the third best defense against the run in the National Football League. They only give up the second best, only 91 yards per game, but they give up the fourth most passing yards, 276 per contest. So we know that with the Cowboys offense, they're trying to find their identity in the run game. I would say they're leaning towards Rico Dowdle, but it's still not something that they're fully leaning into. The best thing they can do is try to get the ball to CeeDee Lamb, get it to Jake Ferguson, maybe even sprinkle in a little bit of Jalen Tolbert. We'll talk about him later. But when we look at Dak Prescott, he upgrades to that mid-range QB1 status this week. He's QB 11 on the season, so he's already been fine. But I've got him at quarterback 7 in this matchup. That could be a massive shootout. I think Dak has 300 yards and potentially 3 touchdowns in his upside this week.
Speaking of that specific stat line, Dwain, Dak Prescott leads all quarterbacks since week 1 of last season in games with 300 plus passing yards and multiple touchdowns with 7. So Freeman wasn't exactly the hottest start for Dak, but we have seen him over the last few weeks, even in non-ideal matchups, put up some solid numbers. And accordingly, he's your QB5 on the week.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne mentioned it. The Cowboys are maximally incentivized this week to throw the ball because they're not very good at running. The Lions are very good against the run, and they're weak against the pass. And then, of course, the Lions with their offense can put up a lot of points, and that just all the more incentivizes the Cowboys to try to keep up. And so the Lions favored by 3.5 points on the road in a game that could massively shoot out with a total in the 50s. This is just a spot where a lot of the players in the Cowboys passing game could be very desirable. A secondary for the Lions with 3 new starting cornerbacks from last year to this year and a new starting strong safety. Just a totally rebuilt secondary, which long-term is probably good, but they are still very much in the early stages of the season and I think struggling to get everything right in the secondary. So great matchup for Dak and all of the Cowboys passing game players.
Week high 52-point game total, so get your popcorn ready for that one. And a nice little stretch for the Cowboys even after their week 7 bye coming up here. So not a bad group of guys, including Jalen Tolbert, Jake Ferguson, all those dudes to maybe get on those fantasy rosters if possible. All right, guys, now as much as we love our risers, we do have a faller. And Dwayne, I don't think I've ever seen Bills quarterback Josh Allen this low in our consensus ranks. You have him, I believe, QB 8 on this week. Josh Allen, it is the Jets, though.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's like the Star Wars meme, where it's like, okay, Josh Allen, he has to be playing well, right? Because he just always plays well. No, he has 189 yards passing per game, right? I mean, it's just, dude, this is insane. I knew that Stephon Diggs was going to have an impact, but I mean, you have to be kidding me. 189 yards per game. I mean, that's absolutely terrible. He had 131 yards passing last week. So whatever you're doing, Joe Brady, it's terrible. You should stop. You should take the play sheet. You should throw it away. You don't even have a play sheet, right? We should use some more motion. We should use some play action, maybe get some things, get some wrinkles in there that actually help your wide receivers. Maybe don't run Keon Coleman on go routes. Just out there got the guy running gassers. I don't know if you even watched his college film. He's not a guy that's going to beat everyone down the field. He's a contested catch guy, yes, but he shouldn't be running go routes all the time. Let the guy actually do some things over the middle of the field, win some battles, against smaller DBs and stuff like that. I don't get it, man. I think this offense is just, it's broken right now, and it's killing Josh Allen. He's always going to be Josh Allen, Ian. He's going to give you a puncher's chance. He could come in with the QB1 overall performance this week, and we could look back at this and be like, we're complete idiots. It was still Josh Allen. Who cares about Joe Brady? But, man, we just have to look at the facts. I mean, he's not averaging enough yards passing, and now he's got to go play the Jets. The Jets are giving up 161 yards passing per game. 189 for Josh Allen, one of the lowest in the league, and 161 is what the Jets are giving up. Like, we just put those two numbers together, and we're 5 weeks in. We just kind of have to take it at face value. So when you look at Josh Allen, that pushes him down. Guys, it's not like we have him out of the QB1 conversation, but I'm with you, Ian. This is the lowest that I have. I went back and looked. This is the lowest that I have ranked Josh Allen in the last 3 seasons ever. And he has the potential to finish below the QB12. I mean, he did it. He's done it twice already. He could be a low-end quarterback too. Yes, he was a quarterback. You're right. Technically, he was a 3. He was like 26 last week. He could be someone you wish you just didn't have in your fantasy lineup at all, which is really weird to say, but that's where we are this week.
It's really unprecedented, man. He's had 3 finishes, not just outside the top 12, but outside the top 18 quarterbacks this year. He only had 4 such finishes in the last 3 years combined. So, Freeman, it really is this, not perfect marriage, the opposite of that, a horrific marriage of, yes, bad receivers going around him. They're not making it happen. Shakur and those guys are injured. The offensive line's giving up more pressure than normal. And hell, Allen's only averaging 5.2 rush attempts per game this year. So we're not even getting that, Konami code level upside on the ground that we're used to seeing. So you also have Josh Allen as QB8, Freeman. Yeah, a lot of quarterbacks for once that we would actually rather start over him this week.
Yeah, can we get back to the point where Josh Allen throws interceptions? Like, I miss that Josh Allen, because at least that Josh Allen was attacking downfield and being a little bit of a gunslinger and, like getting fantasy production for us while turning the ball over. Like, the fact that Josh Allen has thrown 0 interceptions this year, that feels like maybe the biggest red flag of everything, because it means that he's not throwing the ball enough and he's not throwing aggressively enough. And that really, for us as fantasy players, but then also for Josh Allen, like, himself, that was the best part of Allen's game. And now it just feels like we have this version, Ian, to your point, this version who has no receivers out there. The Dalton Kincaid experiment is not working out the way that any of us hoped that it would. No established wide receivers, especially with Khalil Shakur out. And I'm going to say, like, if your established wide receiver like functions mainly in the slot, like, that's probably not the best way for your offense to be functioning anyway. So you put all this together and then the matchup. And it just feels like this is like a worst case scenario, especially because it's not just like a theoretical thing. We have seen Josh Allen struggle against this defense 2 times each year for the past few seasons. And so it's not like theoretical of like, well, tough matchup, but it's Josh Allen. It's like, no, we've seen this before. And now this is the worst version of Josh Allen going against this defense. So yeah, I mean, it feels disgusting not to have Josh Allen ranked in the top 3, the top 5, but I mean, it's a bad matchup. He's not nearly in his peak form, and there are other guys playing pretty well right now.
We saw the very last one, Bills fans. Chill out. That was nice. 3 touchdowns, 275 yards. But the 3 previous ones against the Jets, I mean, 2 total touchdowns, never even reached 240 yards. Was not overly pretty against Sauce Gardner and company. So, yeah, guys, again, QB8 on the week. We would start Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and yes, even Dak Prescott ahead of Josh Allen this week. What a time to be alive. And what a time to be alive for Falcons fans. Freeman actually got to see the overall potential of this new look offense last week. And accordingly, Kirk Cousins is your Freeman's favorite QB, coming off that 500+ yard effort. And another nice matchup here against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, we saw what Kirk Cousins did last week. There's really no big need to repeat that. But now he has 3 extra days of rest coming off of that primetime game, and the matchup is everything. This is a creme de la creme fantasy matchup going against the Panthers, who are definitely without Derek Brown, Shaq Green-Thompson, and Jordan Fuller. So already certainly down 3 defensive players. On top of that, they could be without edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney and their second linebacker, Josie Jewell. So they could be without 5 defensive starters, and they're already number 31 in defensive dropback success rate. Like, this is a great matchup, and then now it could be even better. So Kirk Cousins, like, the question is not, if you have Kirk Cousins, are you starting him? The question is, like, how high are you putting him in your rankings? But I feel like even though he's on kind of like that borderline of QB1, it just feels impossible not to start him this week because of what he did last week, the progression that he's making within that offense, and, of course, the matchup.
Dwayne and I got Cousins at QB 11. Freeman has him down there at QB 13. So I'm just saying, if he really is your favorite, Freeman might need to pump that up a little bit. But yes, guys, we would start Kirk ahead of guys like Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, and Caleb Williams, amongst others. Dwayne takes us to one of my favorite segments that you've come up with this year, the sicko start of the week. You've been running hot, my friend, but now you want us to trust Daniel Jones, Vanilla Vic in primetime? I actually like it.
I know. Well, look, it's our second time to go to Daniel Jones. We went to him really early in the season. And the big part of it is, like, he's so involved in the ground game. I can't believe this guy coming off an ACL, like, is one of the league leaders in design rushing attempts for quarterbacks. He's scrambling around a little bit more over the last couple of games. So it's a situation where we know we get a nice little bump, right, just from the rushing yardage period. And, like, the efficiency hasn't been there on the rushing. But eventually we're going to have a game where he gets 30 or 40 yards rushing. And that's going to be, it doesn't sound like a lot, guys, but add 4 points to a pocket quarterback passer that might give you 16. Well, now you got 20. And so it just makes it really easy to stay in that 17 to 18 point range, which makes someone a startable fantasy quarterback. Right now this week, I've got him projected for 17.6 points. Ian, it's important. You got to have that 0.6 in there. But whenever you look at the matchup, you're playing against the Bengals. They've given up the 7th most points to opposing quarterbacks just through the air, not even looking at what he's done on the ground. If we look at it overall, the Bengals have been the 4th best matchup for quarterbacks, boosting their production by 4 4.4 fantasy points. Folks can check that out over in the Fantasy Life DVP tool. You can check out Fantasy Boost. And what that does is it looks at what the teams were averaging whenever they played this team that the defense that they played. So if the defense that they played normally, if the offense normally averages 10 and then they give up 15, or this defense gives up 15, then that's a +5. And essentially you do that over every single matchup. So it's showing you what this, defense has given up over the average of the quarterbacks that they face, which is really good. And I just rambled on and really I had a clear, concise way of explaining that in my mind before I came to this segment. I'm not really going to explain DVP to these people. And then I just totally had an epic fail. But anyway, it's really good for fantasy football is the main thing that you need to know. So yeah, that makes Daniel Jones someone that would not surprise me, Ian, if he finished up as a low-end QB1 this week. So if you're really hurting, you can get him into your lineups.
I remember it must have been 8 years ago or something like that, maybe a little bit less, but Friedman had a great analogy where he called, the Superdome, the Saints, obviously, stadium, like the Coors Field of fantasy football, because you always had this Drew Brees-led offense, putting up a bunch of points, then a horrible defense on the other side of the ball, again, wasn't slowing down anyone, so you just constantly get these fantasy-friendly shootouts, like you would see with that thin Colorado air, just always leading to a ton of runs in the baseball side of things, and that's really what we have in the Cincinnati Bengals right now, Dwayne. No team has scored and allowed more total points in their games than the Bengals this year. Joe Burrow and that offense are high flying, and the defense can't slow down anyone right now, 31st in scoring. So I like the call. And hey, let's give Daniel Jones a little bit of credit, man. 3 games already with multiple touchdown passes, even in 2022, which most I think correctly consider his best professional season, only had 4 such games across that entire time. So Daniel Jones, come on, we're believing in you. What could go wrong? All right, guys, we got some running back rankings goodness coming up. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Experian. Experian is to your finances what Fantasy Life is to your fantasy league. It is a tool and resource designed to make your life easier. And accordingly, guys, the Experian app is free to download and serves as a one-stop shop for managing your financial health. With so many spending and subscription details to track, let Experian handle it for you. They'll help you find and cancel your unwanted or forgotten subscriptions, helping you save money and focus on what really matters, winning your fantasy league. Download the Experian app today. Just note results will vary. Not all subs are eligible. Savings not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account is required, and see Experian.com for details. Running backs, risers, fallers, Friedman's favorite, and the sicko start, as always, presented by our friends over at DraftKings. Going to kick things off with a riser, Dwayne, coming off a bye week, but certainly someone who has impressed in his new colors. Talk about Tony Pollard ahead of what does look like a nice matchup against the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Tony Pollard, he's been averaging 14.5 fantasy points per game, which you've been very satisfied with. That is the running back 19 on the season. However, he's got a utilization score right now, Ian, of 8.0, which is a really good number. So his comps have averaged over 15.5 fantasy points per game going back over the last 4 years. But man, 67% of them have finished between running back 6 and running back 12 on the season. So Pollard truly is in one of these roles where it doesn't matter what kind of game script happens. Oh, you want to be in a run heavy situation? He's been getting the ball. You fall behind, you need someone to be out there on passing downs. He's going to be out there to get you some of those catches. And that's really what we're looking for in fantasy. So even though he's been good, I think there's room for positive regression for him to even move higher based on what we've seen from similar running backs over the past several years. And the one thing that kept me from putting him in smash territory, because he does really also have a great matchup against the Colts defense, that's a fantasy boost of 6 points to the opposing running back position. That's one of the best in the league. But they are coming off that bye that you just mentioned. This is a coaching staff that told us all season long they saw this as more of a 1A, 1B situation. That's not played out yet. But I'm just my spider senses are kind of tingling here. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not going to call him a smash because the bye week is a perfect time to maybe if Spears has been banged up, which we know he's been on the injury report, to let him get healthy and really work the game plan out where they could even this out between the two backs. So I love Pollard. If he's in the role that he's been in, he would have been a smash play this weekend, but I just had to ease off just a little bit because I worry that they could try to get Spears a little bit more involved. He is a good player as well.
Maybe more on Spears in just a little bit, Dwayne. But Friedman, I mean, you are in really lockstep with Dwayne here. Both of you guys have Pollard as your RB13 this week, and you specifically have him ranked ahead of guys like DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Ramondre Stevenson, amongst others. So, yeah, turns out, having a full year to recover from that nasty tightrope surgery, also with, I think, a broken fibula, which doctors, I respect you guys. I appreciate everything you do for the community. Starting to think guys breaking their leg is a little bit more serious than maybe you've let on here over the past 2 years. So talk about what we've seen from Pollard so far, Friedman, and what has him knocking on the door of your RB1 ranks.
Yeah, he's been super impressive. And to Dwayne's point, a lot of it is the efficiency and then the fact that he has had much more of a workload in that backfield than we would have anticipated. And then the matchup, of course, going against a Colts defense that is injured and even when healthy, still weak against the run. So you put all that together, it's fantastic. The reason for me why he's not an RB1 is twofold. One, which Dwayne mentioned, we could see coming out of the bye a little bit more of a time split, just teams tend to mess around a little bit during the bye, evaluate, think about ways of doing things differently. So maybe he doesn't have the workload coming out of the bye. And then the second thing is that really, I just don't like the offense that he's in. And even though he's been productive to this point within that offense, I'm still just a little bit skeptical of what an offense with Will Levis looks like when it's fully functional, aka it really might not be all that functional. So that is what is keeping me from really putting him in the RB1 ranks. But just in terms of what he on his own has shown and done to this point, he's obviously a great talent.
I feel like we almost just went through a downgrade situation, and we have Tony Pollard as an upgrade, and Friedman and I both totally couched the whole thing as it could go really bad, guys. So sorry, he is an upgrade, but yeah, there are some issues.
Again, I think I named the running backs he's around. Not exactly the biggest slam dunk this week, but you see it. Are we feeling that much better about Najee, about Etienne, about Mondre? No. And accordingly, yes, Tony Pollard, the riser. But we do have a faller, someone who's the RB15 on the season. But Dwayne didn't see the most resounding week 5 utilization as he continues to deal with a knee injury that did also leave him on the sideline for Wednesday's practice. So talk about Brian Robinson in a tough matchup and in a backfield that we know likes to keep multiple other parties involved.
Yeah, Brian Robinson is my Brass Balls bench player of the week. If you guys been checking out the risers and fallers article every week, it's my last segment, Ian. I'm 7 of 9 on calling these. So I'm better at being negative than positive in fantasy. That's what this means. I'm very good at being negative about players. But when we look at Brian Robinson Jr., it's kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Dak. The defense that he is facing is the Baltimore Ravens. So we're excited. We could see a shootout. We could see a lot of points. That could lead to some touchdowns for Brian Robinson Jr. The problem is we talked about Detroit being a good defense against the run. Man, Baltimore's even way better. They only give up 60 rushing yards per game. Hey, Harbaugh, you might want to think about stopping the pass because you're bleeding 304 yards per game. We've seen what Jaden Daniels can do, right? We're going to talk about the receivers here for the Commanders here in a minute. So it's another game where the incentivization is going to fall on the side of passing the ball, not trying to hammer away the run. I don't think the Commanders will abandon the run. They're going to want to have balance, but I really think this is a weekend where if Brian Robinson doesn't score you a touchdown, it could be a 5-point dud in Fantasyland. He's also a player coming off an injury. He didn't have a full role last week. Last week, he fell into the end zone twice. That's basically the only role they gave him, and that saved you. So there's just a lot of factors here where I can see ways that you could get Brian Robinson on your bench. Okay, guys, you can go check out the ranks to see which players that I would be benching for Brian Robinson. So don't just do it in a vacuum. But I definitely think there are going to be teams good enough out there when these screenshots start coming into me where I'm going to say, yeah, I would bench Brian Robinson Jr. in that situation.
Didn't touch the ball after the 3:14 mark in the second quarter. So again, got those 2 goal line touchdowns. That was great. I think they are going to keep him in that short yardage role. But Freeman, Austin Eckler and Jerry McNichols have really made the most out of their opportunities this year. So it is, again, just a disaster kind of marriage above, principles we got going on here.
Yeah, Austin Eckler, looks healthy, and a healthy Austin Eckler who isn't getting a full workload but is used as a complementary weapon, we know what that player is capable of. And then Jeremy McNichols is actually the guy who scares me the most when it comes to Brian Robinson because he's looked decent so far. Actually, more than decent. He's looked pretty good. I liked him in college. Maybe it's one of those things where it's like, if I just hold on to my take from 5 years ago long enough, eventually it will come true. And now I can be like, Jeremy McNichols, I knew it the whole time. But he's the guy who could actually replicate within that offense what they have with Brian Robinson. And especially because Robinson is dealing with an injury, the team, especially now that they're winning games and thinking about the postseason, they have incentive not to use Brian Robinson the way that they otherwise might. because McNichols can give them maybe 90% of what Brian Robinson does. So the fact that McNichols exists within this offense and has shown that he can be functional within it, that makes me really skeptical about Brian Robinson when he's dealing with a health and injury.
3 running backs this year have averaged north of 7 yards per carry with at least 15 carries. Tank Bigsby, of course, best running back alive, as we've known for all these years. And then, Austin Eckler and Jerry McNichols. Great things going on with that Cliff Kingsbury offense in Washington, continuing to make me eat some chow for some, ill-advised preseason takes. Let's get to Freeman's favorite, though, now. Going up against the Cowboys' run defense that, let's face it, wasn't very good until, and then also we saw them lose to Marcus Lawrence and now Micah Parsons. Talk about David Montgomery, Freeman, and what he could actually bring to the table this week.
I love David Montgomery. I like him more than I probably should, but I feel like I like him just because people don't like him enough. Everyone is so focused on Jahmyr Gibbs and everyone else within that Lions offense, and it's almost like begrudgingly they admit that David Montgomery gets production. But you look at what Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery have done through 4 games. Montgomery, 365 yards, 4 touchdowns. Gibbs, 361 yards and 4 touchdowns. These guys are basically like the living, breathing Spider-Man meme pointing at each other. And it's I don't think it's a coincidence that Montgomery and Gibbs are so evenly matched. The Lions have really balanced their workload. And if you look at the, I would say, industry-leading FantasyLife utilization report that we have, Montgomery, 50% rush rate, Gibbs, 44% rush rate. Montgomery, 55% goal line carry rate, Gibbs, 45% goal line carry rate. 8% target share for Montgomery, 11% target share for Gibbs. These guys have a workload that could not be any more balanced given their different skill sets. So as good as Gibbs is, I think Montgomery underappreciated, pretty much just as good. And in a game with, Ian, you mentioned it, a week high total, there could be enough overall opportunities for both Gibbs and Montgomery to be RB1s. The Cowboys number 32 in defensive rush EPA. No DeMarcus Lawrence. I doubt we're going to see Micah Parsons. Marshawn Nealand, their number 3 edge rusher, also could be out. So this is a bad Cowboys defense against the run anyway, and they could be missing significant bodies on the front of their defense there. So Montgomery, coming out of the week 5 bye, should be super rested. Dan Campbell crushes against the spread against all teams, but especially teams with winning records. I hate to say it, I think the Lions are just going to destroy the Cowboys this week.
I'm with you. I rank Montgomery ahead of Gibbs by 1 spot. They're both in the top 7. But Dwayne, I feel like we continue to rank Gibbs ahead of Montgomery. People, not me now, just to be clear on that. Because of this idea that he's the pass catching back, Gibbs hasn't caught a pass since week 2. You can count that weird lateral touchdown he had, but why are we ranking Gibbs ahead of Montgomery? I don't get it, Dwayne.
Yeah, it's a coin flip, man. But yeah, they're both really good players. I do think Monty's a tad more dependent on getting the goal line carries. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a little bit more big play upside, but a lot of it is theoretical at this point. We're talking about the talent profile of 2 different players. So I like Gibbs in a vacuum, but we do have a situation where the Lions have shown us they're very willing to use both. And they score, man. This offense is amazing. What they do on a per drive basis, how often they're punching these things in for touchdowns. There's just enough room for both of them. And we know that Dan Campbell's willing to stick with the run. Despite all these toys in the passing game, he stays very committed to the run game.
Only the Ravens have a higher team total this week than the Lions. Yeah, be expecting plenty of rushing touchdowns for, again, probably anyone's idea of the best RB tandem in the NFL. Now it's time for Dwayne's sicko start of the week. We're going back to that Titans backfield, Dwayne. Again, a good matchup, but this time, I want to give a little love to Tajay Spears.
Yeah, and this is one of those, if you're reading it, you're probably like, man, you got Tony Pollard as your riser, but we're getting sicko start, Tajay Spears in there. And look, I think it could be a situation where it could still be 60-40 in favor of Tony Pollard, which makes him good enough to be the riser for the week. But 40% in this matchup against the Colts, that's probably enough, Ian. That's probably enough to make you a borderline, it's going to make you like a mid-range running back 3 with running back 2 upside, because Friedman talked about how banged up they are. And even when they're healthy, they're just not very good. If you play in an IDP league like me and you've got their safety, Nick Cross, it's fabulous because the Red Sea parts every play right to this guy, and he's the last person that can make a play. So that's not good, though, for real life football, that your safety's having to do so much work and clean everything up for you. So Tyjae Spears is one of these guys that could come through on just a few plays this weekend, Ian, and that's enough for you in the fantasy box score. I will say there was a runner-up that I would have put in this position if we had more injury news, but yesterday we had Trey Sermon miss the game, miss the practice due to a collarbone injury. When I hear collarbone, I'm like, is it broken or not? Because if it's broken, he's probably not playing. That's not questionable. Collarbone isn't like, oh, you pulled it. You don't pull your collarbone. So, like, they've imaged this thing already. He either has a fracture or he doesn't. So I kind of wonder if the culture just playing games here, because we already know Jonathan Taylor has a high ankle sprain. That would mean Tyler Goodson. Tyler Goodson would be in a full-time role this weekend, and he would have been the sicko start. He's available in most fantasy leagues, Ian. So that's a name that if you guys are hurting this week, you want to try to get ahead of your league mates and just go ahead and grab him now, see what happens. We can wait. Later in the week, you may have to pivot, but Tyler Goodson's a guy that could be a borderline running back too. If we have Jonathan Taylor and we have Trey Sermon out, like Tyler Goodson on volume alone could try to scratch out a running back one finish. So remember the name Tyler Goodson.
Has that theoretical 3-down skill set. And yeah, it turns out the mild high ankle sprain for Jonathan Taylor, maybe, a little bit more severe than we were led to believe. But Tyjae Spears, Dwain's RB32 on the week ahead of guys like Braylon Allen, Tyler Algier, Justice Hill, Emmanuel Wilson, amongst others. So guys, got some good wide receiver discourse ready to go. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Again, that is $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Wide receiver season, fellas, risers and fallers, presented by our friends over at DraftKings. Kicking things off with a riser who finally really boomed in the box score with a wide receiver 6 finish last week. Dwain, talk about Bears at wide receiver DJ Moore going up against the Jaguars in that hostile home London environment.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about putting a confidence interval on these risers and fallers. Like, how confident am I in them rising up the ranks versus falling down the ranks? And DJ Moore is one that I have to say, I'm still a little bit skittish about, because ultimately this all comes down to Caleb Williams. Has Caleb Williams truly turned the corner? Do we trust Shane Waldron that maybe he has actually turned the corner and that they're actually calling a better game? And I think those things are really still unknowns. But the one constant factor here that's not an unknown really is DJ Moore. He's been doing his part all season long, Ian. We've got a 26% target share. We've got a couple of shishi moments already on film where he could have had bigger games. So he's out there earning the looks. And I think the thing that I'm the most confident in right now is he's distanced himself from Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. We were a little worried that this could get watered down and it might be, okay, 20% to you, 20% to you, 20% to you. But Moore has actually withstood that test over the first 5 games. Now, Odunze's been hurt and he's a rookie. We've also had injuries to Keenan Allen. So this could fall apart, but right now I feel pretty good about DJ Moore being the clear-cut #1 for Chicago. We've got a nice matchup this weekend against the Jaguars, who have given up a 10.8. That's the most fantasy boost in PPR points to the wide receiver position. Jaguars, like, is anyone covering anyone, or is this just blown coverages all day? I haven't gone to study all the film, but this is not good, guys. Like, figure out what your assignments are, but it's good news this weekend for the Bears. So, yes, DJ Moore does get an upgrade. He is a low-end wide receiver 1 in my ranks this weekend.
Dwain has DJ Moore ahead of guys like DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, and Chris Godwin, amongst others. So very good chance. If you have DJ Moore, you should be getting him in your lineup. Not so much, though, Dwain, for the star wide receiver on the other sideline in that London 9:30 a.m. kickoff game. Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver 14 in PPR points per game. He's falling for you, Dwain? What is this?
Yeah. Man, this is brutal. Like, if people go check out my downgrades, like, it felt like a cruel joke. I had to downgrade all of these players that I actually really like that have been doing really well. Now, one of them I've got to go fix because it was Josh Downs ahead of the injury to Michael Pittman. So obviously he moves into upgrade territory. But when we look at Brian Thomas Jr., man, he's doing his part, to your point, Ian. Like, the guy has a 23% target share. That's really good for a rookie. He's leading the team in air yards. He's shown us he can make the big plays. He's the guy that's scoring the touchdowns. He's essentially the Jaguars offense right now. He's the best player on their offense right now. The challenge is we're going to get Evan Ingram back, most likely in this game. We heard that from Doug Peterson yesterday. He anticipates Evan Ingram playing. So that's one more piece of the pie that that could just water things down a little bit more. And then we have Trevor Lawrence. He had the boom game last week, but Trevor Lawrence, let's face it, he's been terrible to start the season. Now, I'll say that with the caveat of Trevor has done this over the last 2 years. Starts off really slow, and eventually, at some point, he gets hot and goes on a run where we can feel a lot better about his weapons in Jacksonville. But right now, just when you add it all up, Ian, and then you factor in, you got to play against the Bears. They've been really good against opposing wide receivers. There's enough things here that I can't ignore all of those factors and not say that Brian Thomas Jr. is a downgrade. Again, that doesn't guarantee that you guys are benching him. All it mainly did is I was super excited about moving Brian Thomas Jr. into wide receiver 2 status this week. And I got to looking at all this and I'm like, I can't. I have to keep him at wide receiver 3 status for one more week. Still probably in most of your lineups, but just kind of keep your expectations tempered a little bit.
All three of us have him ranked top 24, but yes, Dwain is giving the slight nod to guys like T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Deontay Johnson, and Jameson Williams, amongst others. Again, that really is where that matchup can play a role in closer start-sit decisions like that. Let's get to Freeman's favorite, though, someone who has been balling out the last few weeks as the wide receiver 1 in what's been, honestly, probably the best surprising offense of the year. Freeman, scary Terry McLaurin going up against a Ravens defense that is another one of those past funnel groups that we just love to attack in Fantasyland.
Yeah, absolutely love Terry McLaurin. And he feels like, I don't want to say like Mike Evans, but if McLaurin had 1,000 yards receiving instead of like 900 something yards receiving as a rookie, he would be working on 5 straight seasons of 1,000 yards to open his career. And everyone would be thinking like, could this guy basically be the next Mike Evans? And it feels like in terms of talent, that's a little bit of what McLaurin is, but like without the touchdowns. But McLaurin this year, finally, he has a quarterback who can deliver the ball to him. And weeks 1 and 2, absolutely dreadful. 39 scoreless yards, 3.3 yards per target. But there was no way with the talent that he has, with the offense that he was in, that his production would continue to disappoint in that way. And so 3 games since then, obviously, he's impressed. 266 yards, 2 touchdowns on 24 targets and a carry. And we were talking before the show, you mentioned how McLaurin is just absolutely dominating in terms of the air yards. 54% share of the air yards. That's an NFL high. And you compare that to everyone else on his team. He's going deep and everyone else is staying around the line of scrimmage. Like, he is a legitimate producer. And he could see a bump in target volume this week because on the road as a big underdog going against the Ravens. Dwain mentioned it earlier, downgrade for Brian Robinson Jr., tough matchup on the ground. Of course, the Ravens, great matchup through the air. Number 1 in most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Number 2 in largest fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers. Absolutely great matchup and a game that could just shoot out. I have this projected at 55 points. The total in the market right now is around 52. I mean, this just feels like an over, and Terry McLaurin could massively benefit.
Wow, guys, when you hear Freeman hyping up an over, that is, seriously like, yeah, all the money on that, all the fantasy investment, we are feeling good there. So, Dwain, again, want to talk about a sicko start here, someone in an offense and just with the schedule coming up that we did shout out yesterday because Jalen Tolbert, man, really starting to see a lot of goodness coming together in his, fantasy profile.
Yeah, and I think, this could be a situation where he keeps the role for the rest of the year because Brandon Cooks has not been good even before he got put on IR. Why not go ahead and get a look at the younger player? I will couch this a little bit. We're looking at Tolbert. Historically, his targets per route run, all those things are bad. They're bad, but he's still a young player. And last week, we did see him step forward, Ian, with a 26% target share and a 9.1 utilization score. Guys, a sample of 1 game. So let's not completely freak out. But at least we've seen there is potential upside. We get this matchup against the Lions. Friedman already talked about it. They're going to have to throw the ball in a situation where we know that Detroit can stop the run, and the Cowboys are bad at running the ball. So we know CeeDee Lamb's going to get his. Jake Ferguson is going to get his. But if there's ever a game where Jalen Tolbert could also come through as the third guy in this passing attack, it's this one against the Lions. And he's a guy that's available still in most fantasy leagues. So you should check him out if you're really hurting. I think he is a guy you can get into your lineups as a sicko start. He's a wide receiver 4, but I think there's wide receiver 2 spike week upside this weekend.
CD obviously team high 38 targets this year, and Jalen's lagging behind there with just 27. But the air yards, guys, CD's at 388 and Tolbert 353. So really has been a favorite of Dax, specifically on those long, bombs down the sideline. Let's close things out with some tight end chatter, starting off with Freeman's favorite, someone who should be benefiting a lot from that Nico Collins injury. Freeman, talk about Dalton Schultz going up against the Patriots.
Yeah, Dalton Schultz, I mean, it feels disgusting to talk about him because he really has not impressed to this point in the year. But, we are at that point in the season. Injuries, tight end apocalypse, bye week, all of it. Dalton Schultz looking pretty startable. He might be decent at football. That's a starting point. He might be decent. 7 yards per target for his career. We'll just start there. He might be a decent player. Now, the reason specifically why you would want to start him this week. The Texans have been productive through the air. CJ Stroud, number 4 in the league with 277 yards passing per game. So he does exist within a good passing offense. And then, of course, no Nico Collins, out with a hamstring injury. So there could be extra targets available for Schultz. Maybe they don't all get funneled to Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. And then, of course, going against the Patriots, who could be without both of their starting safeties. Kyle Duggar with the ankle injury, Jabril Peppers with the shoulder injury. Both of them missed last week. They both, again, could miss this week. So you put it all together, and it means, even though it's a little bit disgusting, I mean, the tight end position has just been disgusting this year. Maybe Dalton Schultz will be the least stinky of these stinky tight ends you might be considering this week.
I have Schultz tight end 10, highest of the rankers, ahead of guys like Cole Kmet, Dalton Kincaid, Isaiah Likely, amongst others. Just more confident again in that CJ Stroud-led passing attack. Dwayne, let's get to your sicko start of the week, trying to again find, I guess, the least stinky of the stinky tight end options, as Freeman so eloquently put it. Zach Ertz, who, hey, if you guys happened to catch that game last week, got missed on a potential 5-yard touchdown, and then down the seam where I don't think Ertz would have ran away from everyone, but, in one simulation, it could have been a 95-yard touchdown. He was open, at least 40 yards. So talk about Zach Ertz, sicko start of the week.
Yeah, I knew, Ian, that you hated Dalton Schultz and that it's personal. I think his family has written death threats to you. But for Freeman to go with the low blow hygiene stuff, you might be off the list. It could kind of be like the Billy Madison thing where Steve Buscemi has the lipstick and he marks one name off. Your name's off. Friedman is now at the top of the Dalton Schultz family hit list. So good news for you today. Yeah, looking at Zach Ertz, Ian, this is the 3rd time he's been on the sicko start list. And he's come through in 2 out of 3. He did fail us one time, but he's the 2nd leading target on a Commander's offense that's going to have to throw the ball this weekend. It's as simple as that. It is an 18% target share. The future is still going to be Ben Sinnott in Washington, but at least for right now, it's still all about Zach Ertz. And I will say, Ian, on the 40 yards, you and I both know he would have been tackled immediately, even with a 10-yard lead. Doesn't matter what the defender was, because as you pointed out, Zach Ertz is a 0 yak player, right? And I think that you've actually verified that for his career. He has 0 yak yards ever.
Never gained a single yard of yak. But you know what? When you have full PPR scoring, Dwayne, who needs yak out here, especially if you are getting into those sicko streets? So, guys, that is going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. Please check out all of our rankings. They are updated over at FantasyLife.com. And if you want to go ahead and subscribe to Fantasy Life Plus, we even have a start-sit tool, waiver wire goodness, all that and so much more for you. So, for Dwayne, for Freeman, for producer Kelsey, and for producer Swing, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.